Hello everyone, can you hear me? I need to some sound check from you. Just write in comment if you can hear me. Okay, good. So today I want to tell you about the process that we are going to use during the PC development for your projects. Here will be some insight mostly about the game design, but it's related. It's really important to understand what do you will develop for your PC game in terms of game design because everything actually depends on it. And so it doesn't mean that this information is not useful for artists or for programmers, but anyway we the principles that we are gonna use, for example, in hyper casual games related to use ready for use assets and something like that, it's maybe not so applicable for PC games because if you want to develop your own indie PC game, so in this case it means that you will work with your own visual style, with your own idea of the game. I mean, you can't just use already for use assets because you will just copy another game, right? So maybe it's not related, of course, to the code. Let's start. First point, you're gonna work on a game exactly, and I want to define at the beginning what is game exactly in different terms. The first one is the definition of game from my side. So the game, when you have a game, you actually have an idea of this game, and let's try to split the idea on different terms and different subsections. So, in my opinion, we can split it actually on maybe on five of it. First of all, of course, the gameplay. If you don't have a game, a gameplay in your game, so I guess you don't have a game. Maybe it's a movie, maybe it's could be a musical composition, or even if it has some video. But still, at the moment when you have some gameplay, even it's really simple, then starting from this moment, it's started to become a game. The next thing, of course, is visual. Usually, we have some visual representatives of our game, but yeah, we can suppose that we also could have a game without any visual. For example, try to guess how much time I knocked on the table with the closed eyes. In this game, so the game is without visual. Or in terms, for example, there is a game for the children when one of the child he is are closing his eyes and trying to find other childs around him. So in this definition, the child who plays this game doesn't have a visual representative of this game, but the gameplay still exists. The next thing is sound. When we have a visual, we also have a sound usually. But there could be also a game without any sound. If we're talking about hyper casual games, for example, a lot of hyper casual games actually doesn't have any sound. Uh, but this is just a specific market. Usually, your players expect that there should be some sound representative in your gameplay. The next thing, story, kind of optional from one side, but actually in any game you have some background related to the story. As an example, you can even not to tell a story, but at least from the visual side of the game, you can understand some stories that lies behind the game. This is really often used in hyper casual games when we have when we don't have a lore, for example, but we have some representatives of this lore. Taking last games that we have on market, like with the shooting, when the agent shoot at different enemies, the story is about some cool agent that trying to kill his enemies. So there is a story, but it's not in detailed. And the last thing, it's platform. Depends on the platforms that you are developing on, you can really could have a different game. When we work on the mobile game, it's the one approach. When we're working with PC, it's another one. When we work with VR games, it's totally different experience for the player. And when we work with console games, when you're controlling the player with the gamepad, it's also could give a different experience. So platform also matter when you're trying to develop your game. Even it's even often that you are developing specifically for some platform. For example, as for VR, and it's maybe not so good applicable for PCs because it's not the same experience. Uh, I also want to tell you another approach that actually science world use for game development. It's MDA framework. MDA it's abbreviation, which means mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. It's really close to the previous idea, but it's split it for less subcategories. So the mechanics, it's rules, or we can call it verbs of the game. It's actually what the players do. The closer one is actually a gameplay in the game. If the player jumping, so it means mechanic. Collecting is also mechanics. Dynamics, it's how players use those rules that are related to the mechanics. It's also could be the simple example. When we have a chess game, we the dynamics is step by step, and it's you have a lot of time to think, and you don't have to usually in just in usual chess, not with time limitations. The dynamic is the game is pretty slow, but if we take for example first person shooter, the dynamic is really fast. The dynamic is about fast reaction, and so dynamic of this game is pretty faster than for the chess. And yeah, so here is also an example, not so trivial, maybe spawn capping and floating and lighting is also kind of dynamic that is affect uh, on the how the player feels the game. And aesthetic is actually how the player the feel. Uh, in this case, it could be your art style, your sound, the no, the characteristic of your games that gives the player specific feeling. It's also about the lore and about the story. So if you want, for example, to learn something about game development from the search, from the research side, you better to look at this MDA framework and a lot of articles describing the processes how a game design of different game reviewed based on this framework. And one approach that, if I'm not if I do not make a mistake, it's from the Art of Game Design book. So you can split your game on four different uh, subsections, which is pretty similar to previous one. First of all, you have mechanics, actually the same. What is the gameplay? How a player play your game? Aesthetics, how it feel? And technology is really close to the platform side that we have here. So technology also could affect on your gameplay at the end, of course. It's related to the platform. And the story, we actually could split the story from the aesthetics sometimes, because again, the story could be really not so important in some specific games, but anyway, it will be here. Uh, and what is important in this scheme is that, as you can see, everything in this scheme has a high cohesion to other side. And I want to show you a few examples based on this scheme how mechanics, aesthetics, and story and technology affect on each other. Let's First of all, let's look at the pretty simple example. It's mobile game Tom of the Mask Legendary, and here let's try to split it in case of mechanic side. The mechanics that we use here is already known. You're just trying to avoid enemies, trying to avoid different obstacles and collect coins. But coins is not important. It's more important to finish the level and do not die. And this type of mechanic is called avoidance. When we're trying to avoid something, and the most part of the gameplay is not about to give a player satisfaction about what he do not giving him some positive feedback, but actually do not give him negative feedback. So the player trying to avoid negative feedback in this case, and that's what we call avoidance mechanic. And actually, if you Google some different mechanics that there is in game development field and game design side, you can find a lot of different definitions for different game mechanics, and you can use it for your future development. And speaking about that, last year I participated in Curious You Summer School. It was held in Holland, and the idea is that I participated in a special camp which was called Serious Gaming, and here was a game design lab. It was held in the University of Twente, and not game design, just design lab. Sorry. And inside the design lab, there was a special how to say, department related to the game development and games in general. They worked about psychological side of the question, but they also give me some maybe good tips that I used in future development for me. One of them is STVNGR game mechanic flashcards. I placed a link here for you on Google Drive. I actually share the slides later with you. The idea is that there is a different cards that describing mechanics. You can pick a few cards from this list to shuffle it. For example, if you don't have an opportunity to meet with each other offline, you can just create a Google Sheet table and to write, for example, a formula that taking a three different mechanics and combining it together, and based on these mechanics you can create a game. So here's few examples of that. Achievements, I guess everyone know what means achievement in this case. There is a definition for that and examples how you can use it in this case and where you can meet it. Appointment dynamic, so dynamic which succeed. Okay, that's not. I just want you that you will learn by yourself. But the good example is avoidance that I described on the previous slide. So this is the act of inducing player behavior not by giving a reward, but not instituting him a punishment. So as I said before, the player trying to avoid punishment, and that's what we call avoidance. Avoidance. Later, I really highly recommend it to check it because it's a really big list of different game mechanics with the definitions, and based on that, you can create your game. Next thing is technology. On the left side, you can see the screen from Google Play Market, and here you can see the size of the application. It was in 2018, but never mind. Anyway, it's still useful. For example, for hyper casual games, but actually in mobile games in general, the size of the application is really crucial. Based on that, the player could download your game or not, because sometimes he doesn't have enough space on his phone, or maybe even it's just a question about good or bad mobile network. So in this case, technology and maybe game engines that you use could affect on the end size of your build, and it's also affect will player will play your game or not. So in this case, when you choose the technology, so it's really important to understand how it affects on your player in the end. As I told you before, when we're playing on game part, it could be really different experience. Especially, I want to mention that for DualShock 5 for PlayStation 5, they have special technology for now with a trigger. When you press it, it have some outside pressure. It creates mm, resistance feeling when you're pressing a trigger button. At least the developer can include this feature inside his game. Another example is, for example, for Horizon Zero Dawn game from I forgot the name of the company, but again, doesn't matter. Yeah, Guerrilla Games. Yeah. So when you're shooting in Horizon Zero Dawn, you have a mechanic of shooting from bow, and when you need to shoot, it's actually really common for a lot of different games. With your left hand, you like keeping a bow in front of you. You pressing a trigger on the left side, and this is a part when you're aiming. Actually, it's really close to the experience that you have when you shooting with a real bow. And on the right side, you like keeping a rope that's shooting the arrow, and on the right trigger, you are charging a bow. It creates a feeling that it's really close to real life, and that's what give a good feedback for the player. And as I mentioned before, for VR, it's really specific experience. And speaking about technology again, technology could affect on game design, on other technologies, on aesthetic, because in VR games, actually, you always have to think about performance. So this is a place where the technology and aesthetics meets with each other. You have to build a solution, perform solutions that will be good for in VR games. Or another example, in VR games, you do not have an opportunity to turn the head of the player, because he will have a bad feeling about that if he do not do it by itself. So in this case, it's the place when mechanics, technology, and even a story could meet, because if you have a story when the player is forced by some other person, he could have a bad experience because you are forcing him to move in specific place. And also you can't build a scene where the player looking at the specific point, because he always can change the direction of his sight. Speaking about connection of technology and aesthetics, another example, I want to show you here on the left side, on the top left side, you can see the game which is called The Last Night, I guess, if I remember the name in the right way. So it's a cyberpunk, what is actually aesthetic game, done in pixel art style. Maybe inside of the technology, they used the 3D models. We don't know that, and in, I mean, it's really hard to make a really good pixel art with a lot of different animations with really good art style. And this task was completed by the developers. This game still are not released, but it's already announced. You can check a trailer. It's really beautiful. So here, I guess there was a specific technology, custom built technology that was used for this pixel art game in cyberpunk style. On the right side, you can see a new announcement of Unreal Engine 5, where technology allows us to build a really nice aesthetic, really close to cinematic views. In game development, we don't have an opportunity uh, calculate this scene before the player when the player playing a game. By that I mean that if the player changing the direction of sight, so the light should be calculated in real time. So we don't have an opportunity to calculate the light before, and that's why it's affect on performance. Because of that, game developers have to adapt assets related to the arts like 3D models, environment, and the size of environment actually also depends on the performance that they want to achieve. But speaking now about Unreal Engine 5, they used SSD drives for better performance, and now Unreal Engine 5 allow us to have a good performance on and it would be and the visual will be the same as for cinema, because in the cinema we actually can calculate the light before, because we always know how our scene will behave in cinema. I mean, the producer usually knows that, and he do it in one specific constant way. But in the game, we can't predict player behavior. But now, at least in the nearest future, it will be possible, because the technology allows to use SSD for fast calculation and fast reading from drive. Another example is Cloudpunk game. It's really similar to the last night, but I mean, not in case of gameplay, but in case of aesthetics, they use again cyberpunk aesthetic, but they use not just the use of 3D models like Cyberpunk 2077, uh, but they used voxel graphic, which is actually really close to the 3D, 3D development assets, but it's a bit different, and it's also create a different art style. And again, you have to build a specific technology pipeline to do that. Another case is Ori and the Blind Forest on the right side and the bottom. So Ori and the Blind Forest, at least I mean the first part, it's totally a 2D game. I mean, two-dimensional game, and from gameplay perspective. But if you look uh, at the visual of the game, it looks like it was made in 3D, and this is true. There was used specific technology. Developers made 3D models, and they write a specific shaders and tools that allow us to um, make something between a 3D art and 2D art. So check it later. There are a lot of videos related to the oriented platforms and the process of development. I really recommend it to see how it was done, and especially different GDC lectures on YouTube related to this project. The next thing, how the aesthetics related to the trend, to the different trends, to our real life marketing. This is an example of Brawl Stars games, which is really popular right now on mobile platform. It's a battler. Really, it has different modes related to. You can play different games like football or just simple shooting or gem collecting. This game is pretty close to esport mobile gaming. But just I want to show you how the trend that we had on the market affected on this game. This game is pretty close in case of visuals to Fortnite game, and in case of idea, it's also really close in this case. We can see that the idea of the squad that we have on the screen was just copied from Fortnite. I mean, a lot of games did that. Maybe Fortnite copied it from PUBG game, but anyway, the trends that we had in this period of time affected on the development of this game and decisions that the developers had. And another thing I want to mention is that this art style with this black outline was used in the game, and it was really close to the effect that we have on Borderlands. So my point is here, try to see what trends we have right now, what are good ideas was implemented before that make a game special, try to combine them, and maybe you will get your own cool idea. Because my idea is usually some one idea, another one idea, a combination of them, and this is my idea. Uh, Speaking about aesthetics, here's a few examples of hyper casual games. For hyper casual games, we usually use really simple art style, but you can see that they are different, but at the same time they have something similar. They are simple. They are really easy to read, and this again how trends on the market affect on the game. I especially want to mention two of these projects. First of all, it's Mr. Bullet. Mr. Bullet was made in 2D, which is not really open for the hyper casual games because it affects on the market KPIs. That's why it's really interesting that this game was really successful. Maybe because the aesthetics was done really good for these games. In case of mechanics, it was the best solution, I guess, and that's why it performed really good. And another one is Agent Action, which is rising in the top charts right now. It's a new game from Voodoo, and this game is specific that it has more close to real look like art style. And this is a trend that we have now. More games trying to be more realistic. In this case, there is a more requirements to the hyper casual trends, and it's also a feedback for us that we need to build our games from realistic side of view. Speaking about story again, the story is not are not only words in this case, not are but is actually. There is a typo in my slides. So Thomas was alone. It's a really good example of the game that has story without any word, just the forms, colors, and it gives a player the really sad story about simple squares, rectangles, and other stuffs by just changing the form of these figures and the colors our main character Thomas. Again, Agent Action is a story about some agents that are trying to kill his enemies. We're not talking a story at all, but it's clear just from the game. Their Easter was the first game that made a kind of games that called walking simulation. We just walking, we do actually nothing. We just learn the world around us, and at the end we actually understand that there is a story behind it, and this is also point how you can affect on your player in case of story. I mean, of course, there is a pretty simple thing. It's just to develop a story by words, but usually your player should be engaged in your game by mechanics, by your visual. And this, my point is that you should connect your story to your mechanics and to your visual, and in this case, it will work. Stanley Parable, another good example. You're actually playing like the hero of some story, and you can choose your story, and the commentators that you have always comment kind of the after of your story, always commented the things that you are do, and it's also a good example how the mechanics are connected to the story. Oxenfree, pretty simple example. It depends on your choices in your dialogues with your friends. The story could change. Another example is sorry, Oxenfree. Just check the developers of Oxenfree. They have another game where you have to beat a devil in a drink fight. It's also have the same mechanic and it's pretty fun. So just check it in case of maybe videos, some maybe gameplay videos or something like that. Journey is actually just a story about your journey when you're trying to achieve when you're trying to move from point A to point B, and during this world exploration, you know the story of the game. And the Florence, it's a really good example. It was before on only on mobile, but now you also have an opportunity to play it on the PC. Florence is a story about a girl who meet a guy, and actually, you don't have any word in this game, as I know at least. Maybe some. At least the characters are not talking with each other in case of words. Maybe some symbols, maybe something else, and I guess actually you can see the full picture. Uh, so the Florence is about how to connect mechanics and gameplay in your game with their aesthetic. So returning to this theme, we see that due to the high cohesion, it's really hard to manage everything in time. I mean, when you have a lot of the things that you have to think, that you should think about, uh, it's really hard to manage everything. And my recommendation is pretty simple. How to manage it, write the documentation. Especially for PC game, it's really important. For hyper casual games, we can work without a big a bunch of documentation. We can just write a few specification docs, but even in this case, we use that. And speaking about PC games, that's what you have to do. Always have to do. Most of the work that related to documentation should be written by game designers, of course, but artists and programmers also should participate in that, because when you have a lot of this cohesion, you also have to manage it somehow, and the documentation is the best way how to do that. Previously, I talked before about pre-production and production and post-production stage. I don't want to stop here for a lot of time, but the idea is simple. Try to do as much work as possible on pre-production stage because it affects how your production stage will be. What is the effectiveness of your what will be your effectiveness on production stage is affected by pre-production. And on pre-production stage, try to write a lot of documentation because everything should be clear and everything should be right in the right way because you don't have an opportunity to do it in production. So speaking about documentation, let's start from the few tips that I have. Sorry for this that it's in Russian, but I will describe everything. This is just an example that I had, and so it was just a lot. I guess I spent a lot of time to write the documentation really on English, so I just want to describe it everything. Here is an example of the projects that we had. It's actually a mobile project, but even in this case, we had a thing that we call the concept doc. Concept doc, it's the main document that describes everything for the developers related to the implementation of the game. You can also call it like game design documentation, but usually developers separate these definitions. But let's speak about the structure. First of all, use a cool feature that we have in the Google Docs is um, sorry, how this calls, uh, not a structure, but let me, okay, never mind. The things that give you opportunity to build your yeah, it's called contents, contents of your doc. You can build it based on the headers that you have in your Google document. Actually, let me maybe show you how it is, how it works. Suppose I have this doc, and here is an example. Let me just go here. This is our working doc, but later I just will delete everything. So here you can see on this side, again, it's in Russian because I have a Russian browser. You can see the styles, and here you can see the naming, the headers 1, header 2, header 3, and just use that to have your good document structure. For example, concept doc, and like intro, main mechanic, marketing, or anything else, doesn't matter. So in this case, you can see that starting, it already appears a special structure that we have here. If you don't have it, I guess you can, somewhere here, you can find how to open it. But anyway, the idea is that right now you can just click on it and to move to this place, like that. Uh, Again, when you have a really long documentation, it's really cool feature because based on that, we can find any information easily. And another thing that I really highly recommend to use, it's in insert. I guess we have this contents. Yeah, yeah. Here we have it. We can choose it with the links on the right side with the links, and to place it at the beginning on your doc. And later, when you want to move to the specific thing at the beginning, you have this headers. You can just click on it and to move to the specific place. So pretty simple. Don't have to do it by your hand. So use this feature because it's really useful. And of course, it helps you to find all information really fast. As an example, let me describe it here. We have the name of the doc, the general information, specifically for developers, general concept of the game, genre, references, setting, visual style, detailed description of game mechanics. Glider is a mechanic related to our game, the main weapon, and additional weapons. So here is an example of description that we use for our game. When we have a specific mechanics that not like common, for example, not a shooting, we all know what is shooting. If it's not specifically for your game, it's better to write a definition. Here we have a word track. What we mean by track is a special game level where the glider is moves. Usually we also have a definition for the glider in this place somewhere here. So the idea is if you show the documentation to the person who know nothing about your game, he should understand everything. It keeps you and keep you the documentation updated if you change something. This is, I think, maybe not about the pre-production stage totally to keep the documentation in an updated way because everything is changed in pre-production stage, but at least the idea should be figured out at the end of the last day of the week. Uh, Here is an example how to use the comments actually, and this highlighting with the colors, use it a lot because it helps you to understand. Google Docs actually also have a good feature with commenting. Just need to write everything if you have, when a lot of people work on documentation, even not just a good person, actually not a lot, you have to communicate somehow and to place specific and to review a docs and use the comments for that. Actually, also some tips. You can write a last update date when the document was updated. Here I'm showing you that you can use also color reference for different parts of the docs. For example, the green is for game designers, the blue for the programmers, red for the artists, yellow for some other details. And if you want to delete text from your doc, do not delete it actually because maybe later you will rethink about it and you will want to restore your text. It's better just to highlight it with the black color. Here you can see that I have a black color for highlighting and white uh, for my font, but actually you don't have to do that. Just keep the text black and highlight it in black, so you will see just the black spaces that something is deleted. And later, if you want to just read that, you can just select this area and to see everything. Let me again demonstrate it, maybe just to be sure that you understand it the right way. For example, I have some text. Here is a part that I want to delete. I highlight it with a black color, and I don't see anything. But if I highlight it, but actually now Google feature even have a feature that you can just move a cursor on the place and you see a text. So again, the good feature just to to remove something that maybe could be that maybe you need later. Next thing, speaking about names, I described before that naming is important. So try to keep your name consistent. Develop a system that will be comfortable for you. Sometimes we use this kind of thing. We're writing at the beginning what's this type of the dog. For example, in this case, is specification dog or technical task. So I'm writing it in Russian like TZ, then underscore the name of the specific specification. In our case, we also write it in Russia just to simplify a search. When I want to find something on my Google Drive, I can write it in English or in Russia, depends on the name of the doc, or try it a few options and I will find it. You can also use the last update date, but it depends on you because maybe you can write it inside the doc, or maybe because it's maybe hard to manage last update text inside the doc and inside the name of the doc. And it's the same actually for different type of docs. I already told you about the folders. Keep it clear. Keep it depends on your department and other stuff. I didn't mention that we have a specific. I mentioned the specification that has a specific in a specific folder, so you can do it the same way. Roadmap. I want to demonstrate the approach that we also somehow used in our development. It's not maybe good. It's not maybe applicable for hyper casual games because the development process is pretty short. But when you have a big project, maybe it's better to build a roadmap of your project in case of mechanics development. Here you can see that we started from level generator in our project. Then we implemented moving and shooting, and they implemented at the same time because they are important to understand mechanic, and the level generator in the first place because we cannot play a game without level generation. At least some pretty simple. I also colored some of them in specific colors related to the different production process on different systems. So the level generator enemy system, mission systems. Here's some typo, okay, never mind. So the idea is that these three things are related to the levels. The blue things related to the player and the player behavior. Everything related to screen states and UI are different thing, and shop upgrade is something really different. And for the publishing, we have some post-production things that we do in the last stage. So if you build at least this simple roadmap, it will give you much more information what you should do and which stage of the project. You also actually could add here, for example, some art producing or story producing, and depends on your game. As just an example, pretty simple how you do that in Trello, or you can do it even in your track to create a different board for that. It's Epic Games Trello roadmap. Just a high level specification. What are they going to develop on the next stage? Uh, and next thing I want to say, you play to your strengths. Most part of you are programmers, so try to use tools that we use in programming from programming side. Here is an example what I built in some kind of I guess it was in draw.io. It's specific tool to build a UML diagrams, for example. But here I placed the logical diagrams. We are programmers. We are studying in IT university. So for us, it's pretty simple. I mean, in the high probability, we are people who has a logical type of thinking, and try to build everything related to the systems in your game. For example, we have a skill systems, upgrade system, customization, shooting, and character moving and control, and some other stuffs. All of them are related to the player. And here we also can build how it's related to other systems. For example, how player behaves affect on our analytics systems. Based on that, we will build our analytics. And ads is related to analytics systems and game state systems because we need to understand in which state game right now to understand how we want to show our ad. Uh, and if you have a lot of connections, it's useful to understand the problem from the connections from the cohesion side, not only for the programmers. It's also important for game designers because the game designers should understand where they have a high cohesion between logical systems, and because it's affect on the game, it affects and on the complexity of the game, of the complexity of understanding mechanics, and the same for the art. You can understand how much assets you have to build to build your game. For example, we can in this case, if we have low cohesion with wave building system and wave generator, we can throw it away and maybe to replace it with some other logic. So it's pretty simple for us. In case of game design, we can rebuild the system. It doesn't affect a lot of other stuff. It's also pretty simple to rebuild for the programmers because they know how to remove only one side of the question and replace it with each other because it affects only one. And from the art side, if it's somehow affected in the way building system is affected on the art assets that we have, we just rebuild one part and it's pretty simple. But in case of player, maybe it's much more harder, but it depends. So together, it's better to build these two things, roadmap and systems together. Try to build your systems inside your games and place it in the roadmap. The idea is that with your roadmap on each next stage, your game should be more clear, more understandable, more better, and more closer to release. And if something is go wrong on this stage, as early you understand that something is gone wrong, it's much more easier for you to rebuild when you're at the beginning, not when you're at the end. Here's just a few examples. Okay, vision doc versus concept doc. There's are two different types of documents, and you have to write two of them. And actually, these are docs that are built not just by game designers, but by the whole team because you're building project together. So first of all, vision doc. It's just high level vision about your game. What is this about? If we take Mario, it's a game about some man who trying to save the princess. He jumping on his enemies and avoid obstacles and jumping onto different platforms. High level vision without any details. It does not usually contain technical details and numbers, for example, how much levels do we have, and other stuff, except numbers related to the financial maybe side of the question. Because if you want to look for the partner, for investor or publisher, in this case, maybe you have to include numbers related to the financial side of the question. It's good for advertising for the pitching. As I said before, vision docs is used, so it's good if you're trying to sell your idea to some publisher or some partner, or just to other teammates that you want to include in your team. You need to understand the idea of your game. So this is a good thing for advertisement and pitching. It could be shown to investors. It has usually a business perspective. By that, I mean, where are you going to publish a game? Steam, your own site, maybe it's social network or something else, up to you. And it usually contains USP, unique selling point. On the few next slides, I have a link on what it's actually about, but in general, it's clear from the definition. It's the things that make your game unique. Next side of the question, concept doc. It's more detailed description, everything that you need for development. Concept document could have, for example, if concept doc or if vision doc has 2 pages, concept doc could have 10 pages if it's more detailed. But do not place everything in one place. It's better to have a different documentation, depends on the systems that I described, by definition that I described before. Split it for different game design docs because it's much more easy to work to one part of the docs than to work with the length concept document. But if you're comfortable to work with that, maybe it's even better because everything in one place and it's much more easy. But you can place Excel tables with the formulas inside the concept doc, right? Roadmap for developers usually it contains the idea that how to develop systems one by one. It can contains technical details and numbers. What how for example links on different assets for the programmers on artists or references. Uh, it contains external links to some docs, for example, as balance tables. It's closer to game design doc. Game design doc usually contains. I don't know that anyone use a really big game design document right now. Maybe AAA studios usually use their own wiki pages that are really close to game design documents, but much more easy to read, of course. Few conclusions about everything. Try to design your game with MDA framework. Think in case of mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. Keep it simple because you have only 1 month and 1 week you will spend on pre-production stage. So try to develop a simple game, but at the same time try to make it unique. My recommendation is research some indie developers. Search for references. I recommend you to check Rami Ismail, Lazy Bear Games company, Azamatika. He is a Russia indie developer with really fun small games. And in general, check games from DevGam site, especially games that are related to indie category. Check what other games on the showcase. Maybe it's a bit harder because there are a lot of different games, but check DevGam Award and check for uh, yeah, in general, check DevGam Award and what are the games they have because it's pretty simple to find them. And you can see it so actually on YouTube channel of DevGam. Just write DevGam Award and it's easy to find for different years and for different cities. Development is ruled by game design. Sorry for programmers and artists, but this is true because depends on that engagement of your game depends on the game designer side how mechanics are looks like what other mechanics do you have in the game what are the art style this is actually part of the artist what is the technical side of the question what's your performance side of the question it's also connected to game design side because depends on the idea it could affect again on technology on aesthetics on story and other stuff it affects on volume of work that you have to do. If the game designers have a cool idea like Witcher 4, so in this case maybe you will not complete the project at all. And as a result, it's affect on success of the development of your game. So try to be consistent in your game design. If you are not game designer, do not afraid to give a feedback to your game designers that this is too perspective, this is too much work, and other stuff. So your game designer should be highly connected with your artists and programmers and artists and programmers should give a good feedback to the game designers and also propose ideas because most of you do not have an experience maybe in real not real maybe but full game development cycle I guess and so each one of you could be a game designer that could give you a good idea but just a programmer could propose a cool idea in case of technical side especially artists could propose a cool idea from art side but everything so the game designer is it's a high power but at the same it's a strong power but at the same time it's strong responsibility so think from this side and the last point that I want to say here prepare your questions by the way it's a task for everyone who work on PC games, not only for game designers. It's also important to understand the field from PC and art side of the question. Find 5 short indie games, not from big studios. Short, it's of course it's really depends on what we should call short, but just to try to find indie games that was developed not so by so big studios. It's pretty simple to find. Use GDC for that, especially because they often talk something. They even have, I guess, special lectures by indie developers, for example, as Celeste or in the Blind Forest, but or in Blind Forest, kind of the big studio right now because it was bought by Microsoft. But this is also a good example. It's not a big game. Uh, So, and better to choose some kind of by last hits, I mean, do not try to choose something that was developed in your childhood, because maybe it's not a good point for current marketing. If you choose a Mario, like no, Mario, of course, is not indie game, but anyway, if you choose a old Mario game, maybe it's not so suitable for current situation in the market. Uh, just find them, write them in the doc, and let me see what you find. Choose one of them and describe it in case of mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. If your game have a lot of different mechanics, maybe it's not a good point to take this game, by the way, because I guess this game was developed really a long time. As an example, really cool, really truly indie game is Stardew Valley. But Stardew Valley was developed by one person, but during 5 years of self-development, without money, without job. His girlfriend just support him during these 5 years. He almost didn't work, and he just developed his game. And at the end, he did a success. But the key is that maybe this is a survival mistake, and you need to. And because this game, it was developed during 5 years, just because there are a lot of different mechanics, a lore, stories, and other stuff. Uh, so maybe to choose something that do not contain so much different mechanics, but if it has some of them, describe at least core mechanic. For example, for Mario, for this kind of the old platform Mario, the main mechanic is jumping and moving. Not even an enemies, not even a story, not even the key that he is growing or shooting, and the key that he pushing his enemies to kill. The main idea is to just move from point A to point B, moving and jumping. Define your USP. Here is the link to understand what is USP, and the core mechanics actually also has a link. Try to find current trends in case of indie. Use for that Google Trends, a really cool tool when you can just write a word and to see when it was popular. For example, if you write a cyberpunk, I guess you will see a lot of requests during the last maybe 2 3 years. Use Steam for that. It's also the replace trends that we have right now. Of course, it's not if it's not a setting. And Epic Game Stores maybe, especially in cases they have free. I mean, Epic Game Stores right now releasing not unique but exclusive games usually that are not available on Steam. So maybe this is a good point to check what they sell right now and how it affects on the market. Uh, Everything of it you have to do in your team folders. If you do not have access, you need to write in Discord to Lera, and she will give you an access to your team folders. Uh, Write it here in Google Doc. Maybe you can use Google Excel, but in case of mechanics, dynamics, aesthetics, I guess it will take much more time. You don't have a specific deadline, but we try to move brainstorm generation for PC games in 2 stages. First of all, you do it just in one day with hyper casual game development. The hyper casual game development have a less time for the idea, then this has to start work development. But because PC games are a bit more complex, you will have 2 days to do that. I mean, you have a Monday and Tuesday to figure it out idea of your game, but you need to complete this task to understand current market. This is actually the part of research that you need to do, because without that it will be pretty hard to find your idea. If you just take an idea from your head without any analyzing on any analysis of the market, you will have a problem, I guess. So use links that I described before, use materials, and actually on the link where I have a mechanics cards, there's also some materials that I get from Curious You related to the scientific game design and other stuff. And if you want to know more about that, I highly recommend it to check these materials. So it's done from me. If you have questions, just ask it right now. I wait for like 30 seconds, and if there is no questions, thank you a lot. Let's wait for a bit. And I want to share you the slides with you with the links. If you have any questions, you can write it here on any time in Telegram. And speaking about the protest that we'll have tomorrow, a bit later I will write in chat how it will be held and when, and you will know everything today. So I don't see any questions. So thank you a lot for your time. See you tomorrow. Just a bit later, I will write all information. But just for general information, we start at 11 o'clock. If nothing changed during 1 hour, if something changed, I will write you. But in general, I'll write the whole information in the chat later. But so we start at 11. Depends on your team. Thank you a lot. Bye bye.